The humid air hung heavy over the small village clinic nestled deep within the Honduran rainforest. Dr. Emily Carter, her brow damp with perspiration, gently examined a young boy's arm, burned badly in a cooking accident. Her touch was soft, her eyes filled with genuine concern. This wasn't just a job for Emily. It was a calling. She had dedicated her life to bringing medical care to underserved communities, places where doctors were scarce and hope even scarcer. Emily wasn't just brilliant. She was compassionate. She spoke the local dialect fluently, laughing with the children and offering comfort to the worried mothers. The villagers trusted her, relied on her. They knew she was there to help, not to exploit. Her small clinic, funded by donations and sheer willpower, was a beacon of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. Today, however, that light was about to be extinguished. A black SUV, out of place and menacing, roared into the village square, shattering the peaceful atmosphere. Men in dark sunglasses and tactical gear spilled out, their faces grim, their intentions clear. They moved with a practiced efficiency, weapons raised, cutting off any chance of escape. The villagers scattered in terror, their cries echoing through the trees. Emily, startled but resolute, stood her ground. She knew these men weren't here for medical assistance. They were here for her. The leader, a hulking figure with a scar that bisected his face, approached Emily. His voice was cold and devoid of emotion. "Dr. Carter," he said, his Spanish laced with a harsh accent. "You are coming with us." Emily knew instantly who they were, the cartel. They saw her not as a healer, but as a valuable asset, a bargaining chip. Her knowledge, her connections, her very life, all were now commodities to be traded. As they dragged her away, kicking and screaming, the villagers could only watch in helpless despair. The air, once filled with the sounds of laughter and hope, was now thick with fear and the chilling certainty that something terrible had just begun. Deep in the heart of Medellin, Colombia, inside a heavily fortified compound, the cartel boss, known only as El Tiburón, the shark, surveyed his domain. He was a man who ruled through fear, his power built on a foundation of violence and intimidation. The walls were lined with portraits of his predecessors, each a grim reminder of the price of failure. A nervous lieutenant approached, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding El Tiburón's gaze. "The doctor is secure, Chief," he stammered. "She is being held at the safe house, as you instructed." El Tiburón grunted, his eyes like chips of ice. "Good. See to it that she is comfortable, for now. But remind her that her comfort is entirely dependent on her cooperation." He flicked a speck of dust from his immaculate white suit. "We need her connections, her knowledge. The Americans, they are always so eager to help those in need. We will use that eagerness to our advantage." Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside. Gunfire echoed through the compound. El Tiburón's bodyguards tensed, their hands reaching for their weapons. "What is happening?" El Tiburón roared, his voice laced with fury. The lieutenant paled. "There was an incident, Chief. Some rivals were attempting to move in on our territory. They were eliminated." El Tiburón nodded slowly. "Eliminated. See that their families understand the consequences of disloyalty. Remind them that we control everything. Their lives, their futures, everything." He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Let this be a lesson to anyone who dares to challenge my authority. Let them know that El Tiburón always gets what he wants. And what I want is Dr. Carter's ransom." He turned back to the window, his gaze fixed on the city below, a city he controlled with an iron fist. The violence was a tool, a means to an end, and El Tiburón was a master of its use. Far removed from the violence and opulence of Medellin, Mac lived a simple life in a remote cabin nestled in the Montana wilderness. The crisp mountain air and the solitude were his only companions. He chopped wood, fished in the nearby stream, and spent his days trying to outrun the ghosts of his past. Mac wasn't always a recluse. He was once a highly decorated Special Forces soldier, a man who had seen things that no one should ever see. He had carried out missions that haunted his dreams, missions that had left him scarred, both physically and emotionally. Now he sought only peace, a way to atone for the things he had done. His cabin was sparsely furnished, containing only the essentials: a bed, a table, a few chairs, and a wood-burning stove. But there were also reminders of his past life. A worn photograph of him and his unit, a collection of knives meticulously maintained, and a locked metal box hidden beneath the floorboards. Every morning, Mac would wake before dawn, his body still conditioned to a life of vigilance. He would perform a series of exercises, honing his skills, ensuring he was always ready, even though he desperately hoped he would never have to be. He tried to bury the soldier deep inside, but the soldier was always there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be awakened. His quiet routine was shattered one afternoon when a package arrived. It was a small, unmarked envelope, delivered by a grizzled old postman who rarely saw anyone out this far. Mac recognized the coded markings instantly. It was a message from his past, a message he had hoped he would never receive. As he opened the envelope, a wave of dread washed over him. The past had finally caught up with him, and the quiet life he had so carefully constructed was about to be shattered. The coded message was short and direct: Nightingale down. Tiburon op. Mac's blood ran cold. Nightingale was the code name for Emily. Tiburon. He knew that name. He had tangled with the cartel before, a long time ago, in a mission that had gone horribly wrong. As he deciphered the message, fragments of memories flooded his mind. Emily, younger, brighter, full of idealism. He saw her face, smiling, as they volunteered together at a free clinic in war-torn Bosnia. He remembered her unwavering dedication, her boundless compassion. He also remembered the argument, the harsh words, the moment he walked away, leaving her vulnerable. Flashback. A dusty street in Sarajevo. Gunfire in the distance. Mac, in uniform, arguing with Emily. It's too dangerous, Emily. You can't keep putting yourself at risk like this. Emily, her eyes blazing. But they need help, Mac. I can't just stand by and do nothing. You're not a soldier, Emily. You don't understand. Maybe not, she retorted. But I understand what's right. And what's right is helping these people. He turned away, his jaw clenched. I can't protect you if you keep doing this. I don't need your protection, Mac. I can take care of myself. End flashback. He had been wrong. She couldn't take care of herself. And now, she was in the hands of El Tiburon, a man who knew no mercy. A wave of guilt washed over Mac, stronger than anything he had felt in years. He had failed her once. He wouldn't fail her again. He had to save her, no matter the cost. The soldier inside him was fully awake now, fueled by regret and a burning desire for redemption. He knew what he had to do. He had a debt to repay. Mac moved with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. The quiet recluse was gone, replaced by the focused, efficient soldier he once was. He started by accessing his old network, the contacts he had made during his time in special forces. He made a few calls, using coded language and burner phones, careful to leave no trace. He learned that the local authorities in Honduras were already investigating Emily's disappearance, but their efforts were hampered by corruption and the cartel's influence. Mac knew he couldn't rely on them. He had to do this himself. He booked a flight to Honduras, traveling under an assumed name. He arrived in the small village where Emily had been working, posing as a journalist interested in her humanitarian work. He spoke to the villagers, carefully piecing together the events of the kidnapping. He noticed details that the police had overlooked: the tire tracks of the SUV, a discarded cigarette but of a foreign brand, a faint scent of cologne lingering in the air. He visited Emily's clinic, meticulously examining the scene. He found a small, almost invisible scratch mark on the windowsill, likely left by one of the kidnappers. He collected a sample, knowing it could contain DNA evidence. He also discovered a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf, containing Emily's personal diary. He knew reading it was a violation of her privacy, but he needed any information he could get. Inside the diary, He found entries detailing Emily's growing concerns about suspicious activity in the area. She had mentioned encounters with unfamiliar men, strange vehicles, and a feeling that she was being watched. She had even written about a recurring nightmare involving a shark, a detail that sent a shiver down Mac's spine. He knew El Tiburón's nickname meant the shark. He was on the right track. The police may have missed these clues, but Mac wasn't going to. He was closing in. Mac tracked the scent of the foreign cigarettes to a seedy cantina on the outskirts of the village. He knew cartel members often frequented such places, seeking cheap thrills and anonymity. He entered the cantina, his eyes scanning the room, assessing the potential threats. 3 men sat at a corner table, their faces hardened, their eyes cold and calculating. They wore expensive clothes that didn't quite fit the surroundings, and their conversation was hushed and secretive. Mac recognized the subtle signs of cartel affiliation. He approached the table, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Excuse me," he said in broken Spanish. "I'm looking for someone. Maybe you can help me." The men eyed him suspiciously. "We don't know anything," one of them growled. Mac didn't waste time with pleasantries. He grabbed the man by the collar, slamming him against the table. The other 2 men jumped to their feet, drawing their weapons. The fight was short and brutal. Mac moved with lightning speed, disarming one man with a swift kick to the wrist. He used the man as a shield, deflecting the other's bullets. He then delivered a series of precise blows, incapacitating both men in seconds. The man he had initially grabbed was now begging for mercy. "Please, I'll tell you anything. Just don't kill me." Mac leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "Where is Emily Carter? Where is El Tiburón keeping her?" The man, terrified, blurted out the information. "She's at the old sugar mill, outside of San Pedro Sula. Tiburón uses it as a temporary holding place." Mac released him, leaving him crumpled on the floor. He didn't kill them. He wasn't a monster, but he had gotten the information he needed. He knew where Emily was. He was one step closer to saving her. He left the cantina, disappearing into the night, leaving behind a scene of chaos and fear. The hunt was on. The old sugar mill stood silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky, a crumbling monument to a bygone era. Mac approached cautiously, using the dense vegetation as cover. He knew this place would be heavily guarded. He spent hours observing the mill, mapping out the patrol routes, identifying the guard posts, and noting the security measures. He saw heavily armed men patrolling the perimeter, their faces grim and alert. He saw trucks arriving and departing, carrying supplies, and, he suspected, something far more sinister. Using his binoculars, he focused on a specific window on the 2nd floor. He could just make out a figure inside, pacing back and forth. It was Emily. She looked pale and weary, but her spirit seemed unbroken. Seeing her gave Mac a renewed sense of purpose. He overheard snippets of conversations between the guards, piecing together the cartel's plan. They were demanding a huge ransom from Emily's wealthy American contacts, threatening to harm her if their demands weren't met. They were also planning to move her to a more secure location in a few days, making a rescue even more difficult. Mac also learned about the layout of the mill. There were hidden tunnels, secret passages, and reinforced doors. He needed to know all of this if he was going to have any chance of getting Emily out alive. He noticed a pattern in the guard rotations. There was a brief period each night when the security was lax, a window of opportunity that Mac could exploit. He also identified a weak point in the perimeter fence, a section that was poorly lit and infrequently patrolled. As the sun began to rise, Mac retreated into the jungle, his mind racing. He had gathered the information he needed. He knew the risks, the challenges, and the odds. But he also knew that he couldn't wait any longer. Emily's life was on the line. He had to act, and he had to act now. He began to formulate his plan, a plan that would be both daring and dangerous, a plan that would pit him against the full force of El Tiburón's cartel. As Mac prepared his gear, sharpening his knives and loading his weapons, another wave of memories washed over him, more vivid and painful than before. He remembered a time when life was simpler, when hope was brighter, and when Emily was more than just a colleague. Asterisk flashback asterisk a moonlit beach in the Adriatic Sea. Mac and Emily, laughing, sharing a bottle of wine. The stars twinkled above them, reflecting in the dark water. Emily, you know, Mac, I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone who understands me, someone who shares my passion for helping others. Mac, I feel the same way, Emily. You're amazing. He reached out and gently touched her face. She leaned in and they kissed. It was a tender, passionate kiss, a moment of pure connection. The flashback shifted. A bombed-out building in a war zone. Mac and Emily tending to wounded civilians. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the building. Debris rained down. Mac pushed Emily out of the way, saving her life. But in doing so, he exposed himself to the blast. He was thrown against a wall, severely injured. Emily rushed to his side, her face etched with fear. Emily, Mac, are you okay? Mac, I'm fine. Get out of here, Emily. It's not safe. But she refused to leave him. She stayed by his side, tending to his wounds until help arrived. Later, in the hospital, Mac overheard a conversation between doctors. They were saying that he might never fully recover, that he might never be able to return to active duty. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't let Emily sacrifice her life for him. He couldn't let her be burdened by his injuries. He had to push her away. The flashback ended with their final, devastating argument. He had said terrible things he didn't mean, all in an effort to protect her. But he had only succeeded in breaking her heart, and his own. Now, years later, he understood the true cost of his actions. He had lost Emily, and he had lost himself. But he had a chance to make things right, to atone for his past mistakes. He would rescue her, even if it meant sacrificing everything. He owed her that much. The love he had tried to suppress, the guilt he had carried for so long, now fueled his determination. Under the cover of darkness, Mac approached the sugar mill. He moved silently like a shadow, using his knowledge of the guard rotations and the weak point in the fence to his advantage. He slipped through the perimeter unnoticed, his senses on high alert. Inside the compound, he neutralized the first guard with a swift and silent strike, using a garrote wire he had fashioned from his bootlace. He dragged the body into the shadows, concealing it from view. He moved through the mill, navigating the maze of corridors and rooms with ease. He used his tactical skills to avoid detection, listening for footsteps, watching for shadows, and anticipating the movements of the guards. He encountered another group of guards patrolling a hallway. He couldn't avoid them this time. He engaged them in a close-quarters fight, using his knife and his bare hands. He moved with incredible speed and precision, taking down each guard with deadly efficiency. He used the environment to his advantage, using pipes, crates, and machinery as weapons. He disarmed his opponents, using their own weapons against them. He fought with a ferocity born of desperation, fueled by his determination to save Emily. One guard managed to sound the alarm, but Mac disabled the system before it could alert the entire compound. He knew he had limited time before the entire place was on lockdown. He continued to fight his way through the mill, taking down guard after guard, leaving a trail of unconscious or incapacitated bodies in his wake. He was a one-man army, a force of nature, unstoppable in his quest to reach Emily. He demonstrated not only strength and speed, but also tactical thinking. He's memorized the blueprints of the location and used that to his advantage. He knew that the closer he got to Emily, the more dangerous it would become. But he was prepared to face any challenge, to overcome any obstacle. He wouldn't stop until he had her safe. Mac reached the second floor, his body aching, his breath ragged. He could hear Emily's voice, muffled but distinct, coming from a room at the end of the hallway. He moved towards the room, his senses on high alert, expecting more resistance. He reached the door and peeked inside. Emily was there, sitting on a cot, her hands tied behind her back. She looked weak and frightened, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. However, the room was heavily guarded. For heavily armed men stood watch, their eyes constantly scanning the room, their fingers on the triggers of their weapons. They were seasoned professionals, alert and disciplined. Mac realized that a direct assault would be suicide. He couldn't just burst into the room and start shooting. He would be outnumbered and outgunned. Emily would be caught in the crossfire. He needed a plan, a way to create a diversion, to distract the guards, to create an opening. He couldn't just rely on brute force. He had to use his intelligence, his cunning, his tactical skills. He retreated from the door, his mind racing, searching for a solution. He needed to find a way to turn the cartel's own security measures against them, to sow chaos and confusion, to create an opportunity for him to rescue Emily. He remembered the layout of the mill, the hidden tunnels, the secret passages. He remembered the patterns he had observed in the guard rotations. He knew there were vulnerabilities he could exploit. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He needed to focus, to think clearly, to make the right decisions. Emily's life depended on it. He began to formulate a new plan, a plan that was even more daring and dangerous than the first. He would use the mill itself as a weapon, turning the cartel's own fortress against them. The next phase was about to begin. Mac's plan was audacious, bordering on insane. He would use the cartel's own paranoia against them, creating a scenario where they would turn on each other. He had overheard conversations about rival factions within the cartel, power struggles and simmering resentments. He would exploit those tensions, sowing seeds of doubt and suspicion. He found the mill's communication room, a small, cluttered space filled with radios and telephones. He used his technical skills to bypass the security protocols and access the cartel's internal communication system. He started by sending a coded message to one of the factions, making it appear as if it was sent by El Tiburon himself. The message contained false information, accusing the faction of disloyalty and plotting against him. He then sent a similar message to another faction, implicating the first faction in a scheme to steal a large sum of money. He carefully crafted the messages, using language and terminology that would be believable and inflammatory. He sat back and waited, listening to the chaos unfold. The radios crackled with angry voices, accusations, and denials. The guards became agitated, their trust in each other eroding. The first signs of conflict erupted. A heated argument broke out between two guards, escalating into a physical altercation. Other guards intervened, taking sides, and soon the entire mill was embroiled in a violent internal conflict. Mac had created the perfect diversion. The guards were distracted, their attention diverted from Emily. He had turned them against each other, creating an opportunity for him to move in and rescue her. He wasn't just fighting the cartel, he was making them fight themselves. It was time to act. He moved swiftly and silently towards Emily's location, ready to exploit the chaos he had created. The sugar mill descended into a frenzy of violence. Gunfire echoed through the corridors as cartel members turned on each other, their loyalty replaced by suspicion and rage. Mac used the chaos as cover, moving swiftly and silently towards Emily's room. He encountered pockets of resistance, guards who were still focused on their original mission, unaware or uncaring of the internal conflict. He engaged them in intense close-quarters combat, using his knife and his bare hands, his movements fluid and deadly. He fought with a relentless determination, his every strike precise and efficient. He used the environment to his advantage, using pipes, crates, and overturned tables as weapons and shields. He disarmed his opponents, using their own weapons against them. The fighting was brutal and unforgiving. Mac took several blows, but he ignored the pain, his focus solely on reaching Emily. He could hear her voice, calling his name, urging him to hurry. He reached the door to Emily's room and kicked it open, surprising the guards inside. They turned towards him, their weapons raised, but Mac was too fast. He moved with lightning speed, disarming them and taking them down in seconds. The room was small and cramped, making the fighting even more intense. Mac fought with a ferocity born of desperation, protecting Emily while simultaneously taking down the remaining guards. He used a combination of martial arts techniques and improvised weapons, his every move calculated and effective. He was a whirlwind of violence, unstoppable in his quest to save the woman he loved. He had to be careful not to hurt Emily in the crossfire. Finally, the last guard fell, and the room fell silent. Mac rushed to Emily, untying her hands and checking her for injuries. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "I'm okay," she replied, her eyes filled with tears of relief. "But we have to get out of here." Mac grabbed a weapon from one of the fallen guards and led Emily out of the room, moving quickly and cautiously through the chaotic sugar mill. The internal fighting was still raging, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the cartel members realized what had happened and focused their attention on them. They made their way to the back of the mill, where Mac had identified a hidden exit during his surveillance. They slipped through the exit and into the surrounding jungle, hoping to disappear before they were detected. But their escape didn't go unnoticed. A shout went up, and soon they were being pursued by a group of heavily armed cartel members. Mac and Emily ran through the jungle, their hearts pounding, the sounds of gunfire echoing behind them. They reached a dirt road where Mac had stashed a getaway vehicle, a beat-up pickup truck he had borrowed from a nearby farm. They jumped into the truck, and Mac started the engine, peeling out onto the road. The cartel members piled into several SUVs and gave chase, their vehicles roaring behind them. A high-speed car chase ensued, the vehicles careening down the narrow, winding road. Mac drove with skill and precision, dodging potholes and obstacles, trying to stay ahead of his pursuers. He weaved through traffic, narrowly avoiding collisions. The cartel members opened fire, bullets whizzing past their heads. Mac returned fire, using his weapon to disable one of the pursuing vehicles. The chase grew more intense, the vehicles speeding through the countryside, the sounds of gunfire and screeching tires filling the air. Mac knew that they couldn't outrun the cartel forever. He needed to find a way to stop them, to eliminate the threat, to protect Emily. He began to formulate a plan that would be both daring and dangerous, a plan that would put his driving skills to the ultimate test. The truck bounced and swerved as Mac navigated the treacherous road. He expertly drifted around tight corners, narrowly avoiding plunging off the cliffside. Emily gripped the dashboard, her knuckles white, her eyes wide with fear. "Hold on tight," Mac yelled over the roar of the engine. "It's going to be a bumpy ride." He spotted a narrow dirt track leading off the main road. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance to escape. He slammed on the brakes and veered sharply onto the track, the truck fishtailing wildly. The track was rough and uneven, filled with rocks and potholes. The truck bucked and swayed, threatening to overturn at any moment. But Mac kept his foot on the gas, pushing the truck to its limits. The cartel SUVs followed them onto the track, but they were less skilled at off-road driving. They struggled to keep up, their vehicles bouncing and scraping against the rocks. Mac used his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage, navigating the track with precision and speed. He dodged trees, jumped over obstacles, and used the landscape to create distance between them and their pursuers. He spotted a fallen tree blocking the track ahead. He knew he couldn't stop in time. He braced himself and slammed into the tree, the truck shuddering violently. The tree splintered and broke, clearing a path. Mac accelerated, leaving the pursuing SUVs behind. He knew they wouldn't be able to follow him through that obstacle. He continued to drive, pushing the truck to its breaking point. He knew he had to protect Emily at all costs. He wouldn't let the cartel get their hands on her again. He drove faster and faster, determined to reach safety, determined to keep Emily alive. His driving was fueled by a mixture of adrenaline, skill, and a fierce protectiveness toward Emily. Mac knew it was only a matter of time before El Tiburon himself arrived. He couldn't keep running forever. He needed to confront the cartel boss, to end this once and for all. He found a secluded clearing deep in the jungle, a place where he could make his stand. He set up a perimeter, creating a series of traps and obstacles. He used his knowledge of the jungle to his advantage, camouflaging his position and creating lines of sight. He waited patiently for El Tiburon to arrive. It wasn't long before he heard the sound of approaching vehicles. El Tiburon arrived in a convoy of heavily armored SUVs, his bodyguards surrounding him. He stepped out of the lead vehicle, his eyes filled with rage. "Mac," he said, his voice a low growl. "You have caused me a great deal of trouble. Now you will pay the price." Mac stepped out of the shadows, his face grim, his eyes cold. "This ends here, Tiburón," he said. "Let Emily go, and maybe I'll let you live."
El tiburón laughed, a cruel, mocking sound.
"You are in no position to make demands, Gringo. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched." "We'll see about that," Mac replied. The fight was brutal and unforgiving. El Tiburón was a skilled fighter, but Mac was more skilled, more determined. He used everything he had learned in his years as a soldier, his martial arts skills, his knowledge of weapons, his tactical thinking. He dodged El Tiburón's attacks, countered his strikes, and delivered a series of precise blows. He used the environment to his advantage, using trees, rocks, and vines as weapons and shields. The fight went on for what seemed like an eternity. Both men trading blows, both men refusing to give up. Finally, Mac saw an opening. He seized the opportunity, delivering a final, devastating blow that knocked El Tiburón to the ground. He stood over the fallen cartel boss, his chest heaving, his body aching. "It's over, Tiburón," he said. "It's time for you to pay for your crimes." With El Tiburón defeated, the remaining cartel members scattered, their power broken. Mac ensured that Emily was safe, calling in his contacts to secure the area and provide medical assistance. He made sure El Tiburón was handed over to the authorities. Mac and Emily returned to the United States, both deeply affected by their ordeal. They spent weeks recovering, both physically and emotionally. The trauma of the kidnapping and the violence they had witnessed would stay with them for a long time. They found solace in each other's company, sharing their fears and their hopes. They talked about their past, about the mistakes they had made, about the love they had lost. They began to heal slowly but surely. Emily returned to her work, dedicating herself to helping others, even more determined than before. Mac, however, struggled to readjust to civilian life. The memories of his past continued to haunt him. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Mac's cabin, watching the sunset over the mountains, Emily turned to him. "What are you going to do now, Mac?" she asked. Mac looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "I don't know," he said, "but I know I want to be with you. I want to try again. I want to see if we can build a future together." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "I want that too, Mac," she said. "I always have." They embraced, holding each other tightly, their past forgiven, their future uncertain but full of promise. The scars of their past would always be there, but they would face the future together, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The ending was open, hinting at a new chapter in their lives, a chapter filled with love, healing, and the possibility of a brighter tomorrow.